Assalamualaikum, Warahmatullahi, Wabarakatuh, and welcome back to my podcast. On today's episode, I want to talk about my reflections from my second Ramadan. So, subhanAllah, I got to experience something so beautiful as Ramadan twice in my life. So, let's go back to what I did during my Ramadan and what are some things that stood out to me. So, being that it was my second Ramadan, I gave myself goals this time around, which was different from my first Ramadan because it was my first Ramadan. I just was there for the experience. And this Ramadan, I gave myself some goals, which when my third Ramadan, my goals are going to be completely different. But before I go into that, let's reflect on how I spent my days during Ramadan. So when I would wake up to eat before Fajr, before I would start my fast, while eating, I would listen to an Islamic lecture. And these lectures could be lectures that I had saved in this playlist for me to watch later, or some of the Islamic lectures that I missed the night before that was part of different scholars' Ramadan series. So I would watch that, and I felt like by watching that, I was learning as well as eating and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I'm learning stuff about Islam and so forth. Then after that, I'll pray my 2 sunnah prayers before Fajr, pray Fajr, and then I will go back to sleep and then get ready to wake up and go to work. So that's kind of how my mornings were. Now, when I would get home and before Maghrib, I would read the Quran. And what I did differently than some people goal was to finish the Quran and stuff like that. Mine's goal for the Quran was to read the Quran, and verses that stood out to me, I would look up the tasfirs, the meaning behind the verse. And by doing that, of course, it took me a longer time to read, but I felt like I got to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a deeper way, because the Quran is his words. And I felt like I got to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to tell us and what we should learn from each verse as Muslims. So I would do that, and then I will go and break my fast by eating a date and drinking water, pray Maghrib, and then once I will get my food set, I will watch an episode from Omar Salaman's series. I think it was called Why Me? That series was so beautiful, so I spent my days literally watching that. So then after eating, I would get ready and then go to Taraweeh, and then spend most of my evening I guess we could say evening, late night, in the mosque, praying Isha, then doing some Taraweeh. Usually I would stay for the whole night if I could, and if I couldn't, I would pray for a few rakats of prayer and then leave before they have a mini khataba in the middle of it. So another big thing that I got to do this Ramadan was focus on my connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So of course it was reading the tasfirs to learn the meaning of the Quran verses and understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to tell us. And I would try to reflect on them, and I would try to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in different ways. I would think about, I'm fasting and the reason why I'm fasting, and try to remember that. Especially when people are like, how are you doing today? I'm I'm doing good. I went to Taraweeh. When people ask me questions, I would answer them. And I just felt like a deeper connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing that, because I had the experience of doing my first Ramadan. So another thing that made me feel connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is crying. So one thing that I've learned since I became Muslim is that my connection to Allah comes through tears the most, which is so interesting. It could be tears of joy, tears of sadness, tears of anger of something in my life. So last Ramadan, I cried a lot during Taraweeh. So I thought something was wrong with me, because I wasn't crying in Taraweeh during the first, I think, few weeks or few days of Ramadan, the first 2 weeks out of the 4. And I was like, wow, this is completely different. I felt connected to Allah, but I know through my connection, it's with me crying or having this urge to cry. So I did not cry at all, which I was okay, something is weird. So they had this talk at the mosque, and it was to get more information on how to do zakat. Since it was Ramadan, a lot of people pray zakat during Ramadan. So before that little talk that they had, there was door to prayer. So I'm praying Dur, it's a silent prayer. Then all of a sudden, like I just got this like wave of emotion of like thankfulness that like I couldn't believe that I was there doing my second Ramadan. And I started crying. And Dur is kind of a quiet time. So it's like literally quietness and just me like bawling my eyes out and like me making the crying noises. Cause usually you have like the silent prayer, but this one I was like, ah, and I'm like, this is so embarrassing. I felt so embarrassed. I like had to go into the bathroom and like compose myself, which I shouldn't feel embarrassed for, but like it's kind of like, if you're looking back, it's kind of funny that it's like silent and here's like me bawling and during crying. But I feel like that was a cry that I was needed and a cry that was just there for me to be thankful for being at the mosque and being and then there during Ramadan. So another thing it was crying in Tarawih. So I did get to cry during Tarawih, especially they were doing there's that long dua, like during witr when they do that long dua. I don't know what it's called. I wish I knew, but they were doing it, and I just remember just me crying, and like me and the lady next to me who was like sitting next to the mosque, both of us was crying our eyes out, and like afterwards we both hugged and like we became friends. But that cry when you hear the dua and you hear like being the blessings, and especially when during that time they mention pray for Palestine and Sudan, and like I just started crying even more because like while we were busy celebrating and Ramadan in the comfort of our own homes, so many of our brothers and sisters over the world are suffering and they don't have food and they don't know if they're gonna live to see the next day. So when you're being reminding of that and you're in that prayer part and you're there with all your brothers and sisters at the mosque, there was like a deeper feeling and a deeper connection. So I cried during that, and then of course I cried a few times after that. But there's something about, even though I don't fully understand all of the Quran, I'm still learning how to read the Quran and I'm not familiar with some of the meanings of the words. The fact that the Quran can still touch you in a way that makes you want to cry, makes you be thankful to be a Muslim, or like just brings out the spiritual cry within you is so beautiful. And like the fact that I get to experience it is crazy to me, because I remember one sister from the masjid was like, a lot of people who don't know the meaning have a hard time connecting with the Quran because they don't understand what it means. But she said even those who understand what it means still has a hard time connecting with it. And here are you, someone who doesn't know the meaning, and you're connecting with to it. And I thought about that. I'm like, I felt so privileged to have that connection of me hearing the Quran and feeling like I want to cry, and feeling like I feel like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is coming down and hugging me in that moment, because a lot of people don't feel that. And a lot of people take that for granted. Because I remember when I said during the last Ramadan that so many people were telling me to be prepared to fast, the fasting, which is a big part of it. But I said nobody told me about the beautiful spiritual connection that you get, and like you feel the difference in the air, the different spiritualness that's going on and stuff like that. And no one told me about it. And I remember one of the sisters said it's because it wasn't for everyone. It's only meant for those who can feel it. And to think that I got to feel that feeling the second time for my second Ramadan, like, is something that I will never forget and something that I'm so thankful for. And I wish that everyone could experience that feeling, because it's a feeling that you will strive for to get again. And once you get it again, it's a feeling that you're like cherishing that moment, because you never know if it will go away, even though you don't want it to, because it's life. Sometimes you get these deep spiritual connections and sometimes you don't. But when you get them, it's like this beautiful awakening, and you remember the like mercy and blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has restored you to allow you, out of all the people in the world, you to have that feeling, because there's many people who would never get that, if that makes sense. So that was like me connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another way I connected was Taraweeh. There's something so beautiful as like you have a long day at work and you still go to the masjid and pray Taraweeh, whether you stay the whole time or you stay like part of the time. But when you have a work and you stay the whole day during Taraweeh, it's like you're tired. You're telling yourself you can't, but then you're there. Like, I remember one day I was so tired because I had to work, and I was doing like work, and there was something else I had to do. And I felt like it was just so tired. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to Tarawih. I'm so tired. And then I pushed myself to go. I said, okay, you're not super, super tired where you're about to fall over and stuff like that. You can go. And I went, and I did not regret going. I believe that's the night that I felt like I cried for the first time or something. I can't remember. It was like a night that was really good for me. And I was like, imagine if I did not go. I would not have felt that feeling. So there's something so beautiful about that. One thing that I did for the first time was stay for Qiyam al-Layl. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's where you stay in the mosque all night. So you stay basically from Isha until Fajr. So I did not do that during my first Ramadan, and I feel like there was a reason why I couldn't do it, but I can't remember now. But I got to do it this time around, and I got to do it with my mom, so it was an experience for both of us, subhanAllah, and it was her first Ramadan. So going into the mosque and like being there for such a long time is like such I don't know what the word is. It's like you basically are a trooper, because if you can make it that long, especially if you work the night before or something like that, or you have a lot going on and you're just there. And there was many times I wanted to like leave. Okay, you have this pull like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. I'm standing up here the whole night. And I told myself, if the imam can stand here, why can't I? If the imam is literally reciting and trying, like literally has the Quran memorized in the back of his head and is standing there, not only is he reciting the Quran, he has to remember all the rules of prayer, has to like lead us into prayer. And us behind him is complaining, like, who are we? You get what I'm trying to say? If the imam can stand there and do that. So I told myself, I said, the moms are there, I can do it. So I stayed, subhanAllah, and especially I stayed while being sick. So I was still sick during this time, and I told myself that even though I'm sick and even though I'm not feeling my best, was not contagious, by the way. Even though I was not feeling my best, I still wanted to stay. And there was something so beautiful as then when it was time for Fajr, and like people they had food at the mosque, and you're all not breaking your fast, but like trying to eat before you have to start your fast and so forth. It was such a beautiful experience. I don't even know how to like describe Qiyam al-Layl. It was something so beautiful and something that just felt out of this world, to be honest. And like there was a different feeling in the air. And just hearing the recitation of the Quran while you're just there all night, it's just so beautiful. I don't even know like how to describe it. It's just like very beautiful, and I just feel so cherished that I got to experience something like that. It's like something that I still can't fathom. Like I just think about how I stayed there for basically, I think it was from like 8 or so hours. I don't even know. Like just stand there in prayer, and like going back home, like the feeling of when I was driving back home after Fajr was like, wow, I literally was at the mosque from Isha to Fajr with hardly any sleep. And I did it. And the imams did it. And I was just thinking about like all the pressure that the imams probably feel, even though there's probably like they're doing it for the sake of Allah, of course. But there's a lot, and they're human too. But I was just thinking about like, wow, I just completed that. And I just thought about like, and I gave myself like a little like pat on the back because I stayed, even though there was an urge in me to leave. I said, no, I'm not gonna listen to this urge. I am gonna stay. And I stayed, and it was something beautiful, and I inshallah cannot wait to do it during the next Ramadan if I'm able to. So I want to talk about some lessons that I've learned during this Ramadan. And one thing that I've learned that stuck with the most with me is that do not let people disturb your peace. And I battle with that because it's hard when there's people who are triggers for you, if there's some toxic people that you can't avoid around you. And those people are triggering you during the holiest month. And you are trying not to get angry because you are just left, like they said, Shaitan is locked up. So it's just you and your ego is left. And having your triggers around you during the month of Ramadan is something that is beyond this world, because last Ramadan I did not felt that, but this Ramadan, this was the test that I got from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is how to have how to make sure your peace isn't disrupted. And I failed that test so many times, and I passed it. I had to give myself the chance, the props for the times that I passed it, but also recognize that I failed so many times. And it kind of gave me an inkling of what to do next Ramadan to make sure that I'm in a state of peace and not try to have people disrupt me. And it's so hard, especially when you're trying to be the best that you can be and other people around you are like trying to bring you down with them and their ego and their stuff. So basically them living in their nuffs and you're trying your best not to be like them. So that was hard, and that was a lesson, and it's a lesson that I needed, because a lot of times when you're in a good space and people see you going good and they're upset about their lives, sometimes they want to bring you down or something along those lines. But you have to remember who you are and remember who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and try your best not to have those people bring you down too. And try not to let, especially if they trigger you. That was a lot. Another thing is that you can stand long in prayer if you change your mindset. So if you're like, oh, it's so long, and you have this negative notion about going to Taraweeh and it's so long and your feet hurt and da 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 da. Once you change your mindset and be like, wow, I'm really here for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am here to be with community members, to pray and like hear the Quran, and to just be here in Taraweeh, because we don't do this any other time of the year except for in Ramadan, unless your mosque, like how mine is doing a few nights, doing a Qiyam Lay day during once a month. That was me basically trying to say that, struggling to say that. You can stand long in prayer if you change your mindset. If you think that it's hard, it's gonna be hard. If you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes easier, and it becomes that you know why you're there. Of course, sometimes you can't stay the whole night because you have to wake up for work, which is understandable, but you can stand long in prayer if you change your mindset. Another thing was a reminder for me is that if you can pray at night during Taraweeh, and then after Taraweeh wake up for Suhoor, you can wake up for Fajr. And that's all I'm going to say. And that is something for me to remind myself as well. And another thing is surround yourself with people who want to do better and improve their Ramadan. So there are people who are going to be around you to help you elevate your Ramadan and help you reach your goals. And then there's our people who are okay with just being stagnant and just having the Ramadan be the same old thing and not trying to advance themselves. And the thing is, surround yourself with people trying to better their Ramadan and better themselves during the Ramadan. Because if you, as an individual, don't have it in your mind to be around those people, you'll be around people that won't help you elevate your Ramadan. And I have seen it, and I have been around some people who have not been elevating their Ramadan. And because you are, it makes you seem like you are crazy because you're trying to do better than them. And then they're not. So it just feels weird. And when you are surrounded by people trying to better themselves during Ramadan, you feel encouraged to even get yourself even better. So that's another thing that I want to make sure that I have around me a lot during the next Ramadan, is people who are trying to better themselves and elevate their Ramadan, because I want us all to be the best that we can be. And it's good that if you have the people who are around you on the same page as you. So one thing that I loved about Ramadan, that I want to try to incorporate more, even though I feel like I do try to learn a lot about Islam during my free time, but during Ramadan, it just felt like the perfect time. I don't know, like Ramadan, it feels like learning is easier, obviously, because I guess shaitan is change up, and that's what makes it easier. I don't know if that has something to do with it, or it's because there's like a different feeling in the air or whatever, or what's of that. But I still want to continue to read the Quran and read the Tasfirs, and because I didn't finish it during Ramadan, so I still need to finish like reading the whole Quran for from what I started during Ramadan, and reading the Tasfirs behind my favorite verses. So I still want to do that. I still want to like expand my knowledge on the basics of Islam and the basics of spirituality and stuff like that, because I had asked the Imam during one of our like revert groups, what should new Muslims do, like what classes should they take at the mosque. And he said the first thing that you should take is Arabic, to learn how to read the Quran and pronounce things the correct way. And then eventually, once you understand the basics and grow in the basics of knowledge, is take this another class. He said that class is not for like people who are like reverts or like new Muslims. Those are classes for people who already been in Islam for a while. Like, you know, basically if you're like maybe like 16 and you went to Islamic school and blah, 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 and your parents were people teaching you about Islam, that's what the class is for. So I want to improve on my basics of knowledge and stuff like that. Like one thing is that I want to do that I'm doing right now is learning about the prophets from the Islamic standpoint, because I knew about a lot of the prophets before from the Christian standpoint. So I want to focus on learning that, going deep into the pillars of Islam and the 6 pillars of faith, going more in depth and learning more about that. Another thing I want to do is read books about Islam, things that are like simple about like the fundamentals and principles of Islam, the basics, things like that, Islamic history, and learn about Muslim leaders. Because I feel like once I have that basis and know that like how people led and how Islam influenced that, it can make me then understand Islam in a better sense and maybe have me be prepared for that class that was recommended, that once we have some more knowledge in Islam for us to take. And then lastly, how I want to spend my next Ramadan. So I talked about how I had set goals for myself. And I realized that some of the goals that I set was too much, of course, because I didn't know what to expect. But of course, I said, let me see what I can handle. It was a test for me. So basically, what I want to do for my next Ramadan, inshallah, is just read the Quran and watch a Islamic series, most likely from Omar Suleiman, because that's what I did in my first one and what I did in my second one. So that's basically what I want to do. So that is basically my reflections for my second Ramadan. I probably will have an episode come out soon about some life updates and what I've been doing as in my journey with Islam. And I do have a special announcement, is that I do have a book coming out sometime this year talking about my journey to Islam from the beginning into basically where I am about now, or like a few months ago. So inshallah, I will keep you posted on that. But of course, you guys will be the first to know when it comes out. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my reflections from my second Ramadan, and you will hear me in the next episode. Assalamualaikum, Warahmatullahi, Wabarakatuh.